It is a fairy tale story whose ending is far from being written. A story that leaves just about everyone on the edge of their seats. The most improbable candidate has done the most improbable thing. And win or lose, he's redefined politics in America and changed the way a nation and a people think and look forever. His audacious capacity to believe in change has baffled even the most outspoken of critics. The title of his second book sums it up. The Audacity of Hope has given a nation real hope that change is about to come to a country that for so many years was content to go with the status quo. Not anymore. It boils down to one simple phrase. Cometh the moment, cometh the man.
And to all my fellow citizens of this great nation, with profound gratitude and great humility, I accept your nomination for presidency of the United States.
Barack Hussein Obama was born in Hawaii on August 4th, 1961, the son of a Kenyan father and an American mother. His father, Barack Obama Sr., wouldn't stay long with the family, leaving for further studies at Harvard University before returning to his homeland in Kenya, leaving his young family behind. Young Barack would not see his father again until he was 10 years old, and by then he'd already traveled halfway across the world to Indonesia, where his mother had moved with her second husband. Barack didn't cope well in Indonesia and was sent back to Hawaii to live with his grandparents, who shaped his early life. He was enrolled into a prestigious school in Hawaii and after graduation was accepted to Columbia University in New York City. The year was 1983. Barack put law school on hold and moved to Chicago, where he became a community organizer with a church-based group dedicated to improving living conditions in poor neighborhoods. In 1987, he made his first trip back to his father's land in the village of Nyangoma Kogelo, just outside Kisumu. His father had died 5 years earlier in 1982, and as he would later describe in his first book, his autobiography, in which he appropriately called Dreams from My Father, how he and his half-sister took the train from Nairobi to Kisumu and then boarded a crowded matatu for the 20-minute drive to his father's village. Barack returned to the U.S. a somewhat changed man. He had come to terms with his father's land and its people, and had also probably put to rest some of the ghosts of the past that had been haunting him for years. In 1989, he enrolled at the Harvard Law School, earning his law degree in 1991. It was at Harvard that he was suddenly catapulted into the limelight as the first ever African-American president of the prestigious Harvard Law Review. As president of the Harvard Law Review, he could have got a job with any of the largest law firms in the United States. Instead, he returned to Chicago to practice as a civil rights lawyer while teaching constitutional law at the same time. It was here that the seeds of public office were sown. The year was 1996, and his friends and colleagues convinced him to run for the Illinois State Senate. He won and would be re-elected 4 years later. In 2004, well into his U.S. Senate campaign, the little-known politician with a strange last name suddenly became a household name. He'd been selected to deliver the keynote address at the Democratic National Convention. And deliver he did.
My parents shared not only an improbable love, they shared an abiding faith in the possibilities of this nation. They would give me an African name, Barack, or Blessed, believing that in a tolerant America, your name is no barrier to success. They imagined me going to the best schools in the land, even though they weren't rich, because in a generous America, you don't have to be rich to achieve your potential.
Just about everyone was talking about the young Illinois senator with a strange last name. The young man with roots in Nyangoma Kogelo had suddenly arrived on the world stage. A few months later, he was elected to the United States Senate with a landslide. And 4 months into his Senate term, Time magazine named him one of the most influential people in an article that went on to describe him as, quote, one of the most admired politicians in America. And 8 months into his Senate term, Barack Obama made a surprise trip back to Kenya, his first since 1987. This time, he didn't need to take the train to Kisumu, nor the matatu after that to Nyangoma Kogelo. Instead, the senator flew to the lakeside town and was received as what can only be described as a rock star. Thousands braved the hot African sun to welcome him at Russia Hospital, and with him on that day was the man who would go on to become Kenya's second prime minister since independence, Raila Odinga. Later that same day, he made his way to his father's home to see his aging grandmother, whom he hadn't seen in 17 years, taking his children to meet their great-grandmother for the very first time. It was here that he was asked time and again whether he would seek the highest office in the United States, and he always managed to diplomatically avoid the topic, despite the fact that he looked and acted presidential as he toured Kibera and sat in classrooms and talked to kids just like presidential candidates do, at least in the U.S. Barely 6 months later, the man who dared to dream, the man with the audacity to hope, announced his candidacy for the 2008 U.S. presidential elections in his hometown of Springfield, Illinois. Very few at the time gave him any hope of making it past the crowded field of what were considered more qualified candidates. Among them, former First Lady and then undisputed frontrunner Hillary Rodham Clinton. As the months dragged on, many of the challengers would fall by the wayside, except, of course, Hillary Clinton, who would push him all the way to the very last primary, where it was all but certain she couldn't beat the improbable candidate with the improbable dream. He finally clinched the nomination, the first such achievement by an African American in the United States' 232-year history. And he didn't stop there, campaigning throughout the long hot summer, and along the way, picking veteran senator and former Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden as his running mate. The dream ticket suddenly took on a new, more energized look. In the meantime, his rival, Republican Senator John McCain, picked little-known Alaska Governor Sarah Palin as his number 2, and it suddenly looked like the Democrats had been beaten to the punch. The Republicans were looking to cash in on Democrats who still felt that Hillary Clinton had been unfairly treated. But the Obama-Biden ticket wasn't about to be upstaged by this Republican tactic. At the Democratic National Convention in Denver, Colorado in late August, Obama delivered what critics have described as one of his best speeches ever.
Tonight I say to the people of America, to Democrats and Republicans and independents across this great land, enough. This moment, this election is our chance to keep, in the 21st century, the American promise alive.
Obama's very first endorsement came from a most unlikely source. Talk show hosts are usually careful not to openly support political candidates for fear of losing their viewership. But the queen of talk shows, Oprah Winfrey, made it clear who she was throwing the full weight of her billion-dollar empire to.
We are America. We're America with our hopes and our dreams. And yes, we have our faults and our fallacies, but what we really have is an abiding faith in the possibility that life can be better for every one of us. We're 300 strong here with our many colors and religions and languages. Many colors, religions, and languages, but one government, one Congress, one president. And because we only get to choose one, I came out in the cold today to tell you why I believe that choice needs to be Barack Obama.
Kenya. I have a dream.
And tens of thousands of miles away, perhaps unbeknownst to Obama and his campaign team, the land of his father was not to be left behind. Local celebrity artists like Macadam wrote, produced, and made this song of praise dedicated to the so-called son of Kogelo.
As it is in American dream, it is Obama for the White House. All the way from Illinois, Washington, D.C., open your doors for Barack Obama.
Everything Obama seems to have done in the run-up to the November 4th election seems carefully coordinated and well choreographed. His staff, mostly composed of young, like-minded people, doesn't seem to leave anything to chance. His campaign theme has been simple and straightforward. Change we can believe in. Change after 8 years of Republican rule. Change from one generation to another. Change from one way of thinking to another. And even in his final days of campaigning, when the polls were showing him ahead by as many as 10 percentage points, Obama kept telling the crowds not to be complacent, despite victory being well within sight. And the crowds kept coming. This one with more than 100,000 in Denver alone. And if his critics thought he appealed only to Americans, more than 250,000 showed up just to hear him speak in Berlin, Germany, at the very same place where, more than 40 years earlier, then-President John F. Kennedy had delivered a landmark address that still resonates to this day. But the biggest fear, anyone will quickly tell you, is that race and racism in America still has a habit of rearing its ugly head every now and again. And electing a black man to the highest office in the most powerful nation on earth is, to some Americans, a very scary notion. Obama knows this, and he's tried to assure Americans time and again that his race should not be the issue, that the economy, security, healthcare, basic issues that affect ordinary Americans is what he's fighting for.
Now is not the time for small plans. Now is the time to finally meet our moral obligation to provide every child a world-class education.
Whatever the outcome of the historic November 4th election, one thing is indisputable. The eyes of the world are squarely focused on the most powerful nation on the planet. Who would have thought that a tall, lanky, half Kenyan, half American, a man whose roots are firmly planted a half a world away from his world, a man who believed in change and managed to rally a nation behind him. Who would have thought that the most improbable of candidates would have done the most improbable thing? The son of Nyangoma Kogelo is either about to write the final chapter of his fairy tale life or begin a new one. Any way you look at it, this fairy tale story has been as audacious as it's been gripping. It's the story of one man who had dreams from his father that gave him the audacity of hope. Jeff Koinange, Eyewitness News.